Commander Laravel stood motionless on the observation deck of the Cthar warship Vindicator, her spine perfectly straight, hands clasped behind her back as she stared out at the vast expanse of stars. Her silver-blue eyes, characteristic of the Cthar species, reflected the distant pinpoints of light without betraying a hint of emotion. The polished surface of her ceremonial armor caught the dim light of the deck, each perfectly maintained plate a testament to her discipline. "Commander," came a voice from behind her. "The human has arrived." Lyra Vale didn't turn immediately. She allowed herself a moment to compose her thoughts, to prepare for what she considered an unwelcome political intrusion into her meticulously managed command. The Cthar Empire had rarely engaged in military exchanges with other species, particularly humans, whom many Cthars still regarded with suspicion despite the recent alliance. "Very well, Kor Vash," she replied, her voice cool and measured. "Let us welcome the alliances. Experiment." Kor Vash, her most trusted lieutenant, inclined his head slightly. The gesture was subtle, but between two Cthar who had served together for 15 cycles, it spoke volumes. He shared her skepticism. They proceeded to the docking bay, where a small transport shuttle had just completed its boarding procedures. Lyra Vale maintained perfect posture as the airlock cycled open, revealing a human male in what appeared to be a standard Alliance military uniform, though it lacked the crisp precision of Cthar attire. He carried a duffel bag slung casually over one shoulder, and his dark hair was cut in a style that, while within military regulations, seemed almost deliberately untidy to Lyra Vale's critical eye. "Lieutenant Jax Riley reporting for duty, Commander," the human said, offering a salute that, while technically correct, lacked the absolute precision a Cthar officer would have executed. "Lieutenant Riley," Lyra Vale acknowledged with the barest incline of her head. "Welcome aboard the Vindicator. I trust your journey was satisfactory. Can't complain about the ride, but your Alliance transport pods could use some cushions," Riley replied with an easy smile that immediately grated on Lyra Vale's sense of decorum. "And maybe some decent coffee." Kor Vash's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly beside her. Such casualness, when addressing a superior officer, would be grounds for disciplinary action among the Cthar. "I will show you to your quarters," Lyra Vale said, ignoring the human's inappropriate attempt at humor. "You will find the Vindicator operates on a strict schedule. All crew members are expected to adhere to it without exception." "Looking forward to it," Riley replied, seemingly oblivious to her cold reception. As they walked through the pristine corridors of the warship, Lyra Vale observed the human from the corner of her eye. His gait was relaxed, almost careless compared to the measured steps of Cthar officers. His eyes darted everywhere, taking in details of the ship with open curiosity rather than disciplined observation. They arrived at a small chamber that had been hastily converted for human habitation. "These will be your quarters. The environmental controls have been adjusted to human preferences," Lyra Vale explained. "You will find the ship's regulations and your duty schedule on the data terminal. Your first shift begins in 3 hours. I suggest you use that time to familiarize yourself with our protocols." Riley tossed his bag onto the narrow bed with a casual flick, making Lyra Vale wince internally at the disregard for order. "Cozy," he remarked, glancing around the Spartan room. "Don't worry, Commander. I'll be up to speed in no time." "See that you are," she replied coldly. "The Cthar Elite Squadron is not a training facility. Your presence here is at the Alliance High Command's insistence, not mine." For the first time, the human smile dimmed slightly. "Understood, Commander. I'll try not to disappoint. That would be advisable." Lyra Vale turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing, Lieutenant. Your personal equipment has been stored in the armory. It has been examined for compatibility with our systems." "Examined? Or modified?" Riley asked, his tone losing some of its casualness. "Examined," Lyra Vale repeated firmly. "Cthar standards require thorough assessment of all equipment used aboard our vessels. You will find your gear intact." With that, she departed, Kor Vash falling in step beside her as they made their way to the command deck. "Your impression, Kor Vash?" she asked once they were safely out of earshot. "He lacks discipline," Her lieutenant responded immediately. His posture, his speech, even his appearance speaks of human informality that borders on disrespect. Indeed, Lyra Vale agreed. And his equipment. Did you see the state of his tactical gear when it arrived? Yes, Commander. It appears improvised in places. Some components show signs of field repairs that do not meet Cathar engineering protocols. Precisely. This exchange program is nothing more than political theater, Lyra Vale said bitterly. They send us a human who cannot maintain proper military bearing, whose equipment would fail any reasonable inspection, and expect us to integrate him into the most elite squadron in the fleet? Perhaps it is a test of our adaptability, Corvash suggested carefully. Or of our patience, she retorted. Keep him under observation, Corvash. I want daily reports on his performance. The moment he compromises the efficiency of this unit in any way, I will have documentation to support his immediate removal. It will be done, Commander. 3 hours later, Lieutenant Riley reported to the primary simulation chamber for his first training exercise with the squadron. Lyra Vale had deliberately selected a tactical scenario that emphasized the Cathar principles of precision, synchronized movement, and disciplined fire control, areas where she expected the human would struggle. To her mild surprise, Riley arrived precisely on time, though his uniform still lacked the immaculate presentation of his Cathar counterparts. The other members of the squadron regarded him with thinly veiled suspicion, maintaining formation several paces away from him as Lyra Vale outlined the exercise. The scenario simulates a breach of a compromised research facility, she explained. Hostiles have taken control of the central laboratory. Our objective is to neutralize the threat and secure any sensitive materials. Standard Cathar infiltration protocols will be followed. She assigned Riley to the rear of the formation, a position typically reserved for the least experienced cadets. If he recognized the slight, he gave no indication, simply nodding and checking his simulation gear. Begin exercise, Lyra Vale commanded. The chamber's holographic systems engaged, transforming the space into a detailed recreation of a scientific complex. The squadron moved forward in perfect unison, each member maintaining precisely calculated distances from the others, weapons raised at identical angles. Riley followed behind, his movements not exactly uncoordinated, but certainly different, looser, less rigid. Lyra Vale noted with disapproval how his eyes constantly scanned not just forward but upward, to the sides, even occasionally glancing behind, a break in the focused forward attention that Cathar training demanded. The first wave of simulated hostiles appeared exactly as expected at the junction point. The Cathar squad responded with textbook precision, eliminating the threats with synchronized fire. The second wave, however, included an unexpected element, a simulated infrastructure failure that caused a section of ceiling to collapse, separating 3 squad members, including Corvash, from the main group. Lyra Vale immediately initiated the standard protocol for reorganizing after an environmental disruption. But before she could complete the command, Riley had already moved. Instead of maintaining his position, he darted toward a maintenance panel on the wall, pulled a tool from his belt that wasn't standard Cathar issue, and began rapidly manipulating components inside the panel. Lieutenant Riley. Lyra Vale snapped. Return to formation immediately. Riley ignored the order, continuing whatever unauthorized modification he was attempting. Before Lyra Vale could intervene directly, the holographic debris blocking the corridor flickered and vanished as the simulation registered an unexpected bypass of the obstacle. Sorry, Commander, Riley called back, not sounding particularly apologetic. Just rerouted the holographic projectors through a secondary circuit. Old Spacer's trick. Corvash and the other separated squad members rejoined the formation, looking confused at the unorthodox resolution. The exercise parameters did not authorize tampering with the simulation systems, Lyra Vale said coldly once they had completed the mission, with a lower efficiency rating than her squadron typically achieved. Parameters, right? Riley nodded, wiping sweat from his brow in a manner no Cathar would display publicly. But in a real situation, you'd use whatever works, wouldn't you? That panel configuration is pretty standard across most Alliance and even older Cathar facilities. Quick bypass saved us having to go all the way around through the decontamination sector, which would have added at least 4 minutes to our time. Cathar warriors do not take shortcuts, Lieutenant, Lyra Vale replied. We follow established protocols because they have been perfected through centuries of combat experience. With respect, Commander, Riley said, his tone casual, but his eyes suddenly sharp. Protocols only work until they don't. Then you need improvisation. Lyra Vale dismissed the squadron without further comment, but later, in her private meeting with Corvash, she gave full voice to her frustration. Did you see that display of undisciplined behavior? He abandoned formation, disobeyed a direct order, and compromised the integrity of the training exercise. Yes, Commander, Corvash agreed. Although, his solution was effective, if unorthodox. Effectiveness without discipline leads to chaos, Lyra Vale countered. Next time, he might improvise with a tactical decision that gets squad members killed. Perhaps, Corvash conceded. But I admit, I have never seen anyone bypass a system lockout so quickly. A talent for machinery does not make him a proper warrior, Lyra Vale said dismissively. A Cathar soldier relies on strength, discipline, and honor, not tricks and shortcuts. Over the next several cycles, Lyra Vale observed similar patterns in Riley's performance. In standardized drills, he was merely adequate, sometimes failing to maintain perfect formation or execute maneuvers with the precision expected of Cathar elite forces. But in scenarios involving technical systems, unexpected obstacles, or adaptive thinking, he displayed an uncanny ability to find solutions that, while completely contrary to Cathar methodology, often proved surprisingly effective. During one particularly frustrating incident, a malfunction in the ship's secondary propulsion control caused fluctuations that disrupted the precision targeting systems during a live-fire exercise. While the Cathar engineers methodically worked through the troubleshooting protocols, Riley had simply approached the control panel, struck it firmly on one side with the heel of his hand, and somehow restored normal functionality. How did you know that would work? Lyra Vale had demanded. Riley had simply shrugged. Vibration sometimes reseats loose connections. These older model regulator panels are notorious for connection creep under acceleration. That is not a proper repair technique. No, but it works in a pinch, he'd replied with that infuriating smile. Sometimes you need to get the job done before you can do it perfectly. Now, as the Vindicator received an urgent transmission from High Command, Lyra Vale found herself wondering if the impending mission would finally expose the humans' inadequacies once and for all. Priority alert from Cathar High Command, the communications officer announced. Distress signal received from mining colony outpost KT-47 in the Vespus sector. The colony reports attack by unidentified hostiles. Extensive casualties reported. Set course immediately, Lyra Vale ordered. Maximum combat speed. All squadron personnel to ready status. As the massive warship altered course, Lyra Vale reviewed the incoming data. The reports from the mining colony were fragmented and chaotic, highly unusual for a Cathar facility. The descriptions of the attackers were confusing. Mechanized biological entities with rapid adaptation capabilities and unpredictable attack patterns. Preliminary reports indicated the colony's standard security protocols had proven ineffective. She assembled the squadron for briefing, including Lieutenant Riley, who for once appeared entirely serious as he reviewed the incoming data. The situation at Outpost KT-47 represents an unknown threat category, Lyra Vale informed them. Our primary objective is to secure the remaining colonists and eliminate the hostile presence. Standard Cathar elite assault protocols will be followed, with modifications as necessary based on enemy capabilities. She noticed Riley studying the fragmented footage from the colony with unusual intensity. Lieutenant Riley, do you have something to contribute? She asked, a hint of challenge in her voice. Maybe, he said thoughtfully. These things, they're not just attacking randomly. Look at the pattern here and here. He pointed to sections of the footage. They're specifically targeting power junctions, communication nodes, and the way they move. It's almost like they're communicating, adapting their strategy on the fly. Corvash leaned forward, examining the footage more closely. He may be correct, Commander. Their movements show coordination that evolves throughout the engagement. Lyra Vale nodded curtly. Noted. We will adjust our approach accordingly. Though she would never admit it aloud, she had observed the same patterns and had come to similar conclusions. 6 hours later, the Vindicator entered orbit around KT-47, a small planetoid rich in rare minerals vital to Cathar technology. The colony's automated defenses were offline, and communication remained limited to sporadic emergency beacons. Lyra Vale led the primary assault team herself, with Corvash as her second and Riley included despite her misgivings. As their dropship descended toward the colony's main complex, the devastation became apparent. Sections of the facility were breached, with signs of both explosive damage and what appeared to be physical tearing of metal barriers. Life signs detected in the central processing hub, the pilot reported. Multiple hostile signatures throughout the surrounding sectors. We land at entry point Alpha, Lyra Vale decided. Standard breach and clear, diamond formation. The dropship touched down on a landing pad littered with debris. The moment the ramp lowered, Lyra Vale led her team out, weapons ready, moving in the precise formation that had been the hallmark of Cathar military success for generations. They encountered the first of the hostiles within moments of entering the facility. The creatures defied easy classification, partly mechanical, partly biological, with exposed circuitry integrated with what appeared to be muscle tissue and exoskeletal plating. They moved with unsettling speed, scuttling across walls and ceilings as readily as floors. Maintain formation, Lyra Vale ordered as the first wave attacked. Concentrated fire, primary vital clusters. The Cathar squadron responded with disciplined precision, their weapons firing in coordinated bursts. Several of the creatures fell, but others seemed to adapt almost immediately, shifting their approach to minimize exposure to the squadron's fire patterns. They're learning, Corvash called out, adjusting to our tactics. The battle intensified as they pushed deeper into the facility. The standard Cathar assault protocols, which relied on predictable enemy responses to overwhelming force, proved increasingly less effective as the creatures, which Riley had dubbed scrappers, in typical human fashion of assigning colloquial names to enemies, continued to adapt. During a particularly intense engagement in what had once been the colony's mess hall, a group of scrappers suddenly changed tactics, bypassing the main Cathar formation to attack from an unexpected angle, directly through an air circulation vent that, according to facility schematics, should have been too small for them to navigate. Vash, behind you, Riley shouted, breaking formation to charge toward Lyra Vale's lieutenant. Before either Lyra Vale or Corvash could react, 3 scrappers dropped from the ceiling. Riley, moving with surprising speed for a human, tackled Corvash out of the way of the first attacker, then rolled to his feet and drew not his standard-issue weapon, but a smaller device from his belt. To Lyra Vale's astonishment, Riley activated the device, which appeared to be some kind of modified sonic emitter, and the approaching scrappers recoiled, their integrated systems momentarily disrupted by the frequencies. Hit them now, Riley shouted, maintaining the sonic barrage while helping Corvash to his feet. The Cathar squad adjusted their aim and eliminated the disoriented creatures with precise shots. What was that device? Lyra Vale demanded once the immediate threat was neutralized. Modulated sonic disruptor, Riley explained, breathing heavily. Something I cobbled together after seeing how these things react to different frequencies. Their biomechanical integration seems particularly sensitive to certain sonic patterns. That is not standard Alliance or Cathar issue equipment, she pointed out. No, it's not, Riley agreed. I made it from parts of my kit and some components I borrowed from the comm station on level 3. Corvash, still regaining his composure after the near miss, regarded the human with what might have been newfound respect. Your innovation saved my life, Lieutenant. I am grateful. Lyra Vale said nothing, but she filed away this information. The human's tendency to improvise with equipment had proven unexpectedly valuable in this case. As they fought their way toward the central hub where survivors were sheltering, Riley continued to demonstrate an uncanny ability to adapt to the scrappers' evolving tactics. He used environmental features as weapons, created makeshift barricades that the creatures struggled to navigate, and at one point even reprogrammed an automated mining loader to clear a path through a group of scrappers that had blocked their advance. When they finally reached the central hub, they found 17 survivors, a mix of engineers, miners, and administrative personnel barricaded inside. The colony's director, a senior Cthar scientist named Krellmore, greeted them with visible relief. Commander Lyra Vale, your arrival is most timely, he said, formal even in the midst of crisis. These entities appeared without warning 3 days ago. They seem to be evolving with each engagement. We've noticed, Lyra Vale replied grimly. What is your assessment of their origin? Krellmore hesitated, his eyes darting to the other survivors. Unknown. They were first detected near the Experimental Materials Research Laboratory in Sector 7. Our security forces were quickly overwhelmed. Something in his manner raised Lyra Vale's suspicions. Director, I require full disclosure. What exactly was being researched in that laboratory? Classified materials, Commander. I am not authorized to override authorization, Lyra Vale Epsilon Prime, she interrupted. This is now a military security matter. The director's posture stiffened. Very well. The facility was testing experimental adaptive nanotechnology for mining operations. The project was directly overseen by the Cthar Science Directorate and elements of High Command. Riley, who had been checking the survivors for injuries, looked up sharply. Nanotech with adaptive capabilities? Let me guess. It was designed to break down and reconfigure materials at a molecular level. How would you know that, human? Krellmore asked suspiciously. Because that's exactly what these scrappers are doing, Riley replied. They're not just attacking, they're harvesting materials and reconfiguring themselves, getting stronger, smarter with each engagement. Lyra Vale processed this information quickly. We need to evacuate these survivors immediately and then destroy this facility completely. Commander, Korvash said quietly, destroying a Cthar facility without direct High Command authorization is against protocol. She was about to respond when an alarm blared throughout the hub. One of the surviving engineers looked up from a console in horror. They've breached the outer defenses of the hub. Multiple entry points. Prepare for immediate evacuation, Lyra Vale ordered. Squad, defensive positions. We protect these civilians at all costs. The next 20 minutes were chaos as scrappers poured into the hub from multiple access points. The Cthar squad fought with disciplined precision, but the creature's adaptive capabilities made each encounter more challenging than the last. During the height of the battle, as they were fighting their way back toward the landing pad with the survivors, a particularly massive scrapper, clearly evolved from multiple smaller units, smashed through a structural support, causing a section of ceiling to collapse. Lyra Vale, focused on eliminating a cluster of smaller scrappers, didn't see the danger until it was almost upon her. The impact never came. Instead, she felt herself shoved roughly aside as Riley threw himself forward, using some kind of improvised energy shield, clearly assembled from parts of his own equipment, to deflect the worst of the debris. The shield held for crucial seconds, allowing her and several civilians to clear the area, but the strain proved too much for the makeshift device. It failed catastrophically, and a section of metal strut struck Riley with tremendous force, pinning him against the wall. Riley! Lyra Vale found herself shouting, the human's name escaping her lips before she could maintain proper military decorum. Get them out, he gasped, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. I'll hold this position. Unacceptable. We do not leave squadron members behind, she responded automatically, moving toward him. Riley managed a pained smile. Not much choice, Commander. My legs are definitely not working right now. He raised his weapon. I can still shoot. get the civilians to the ship. That's the mission. Corvash appeared at her side, assessing the situation with a quick glance. Commander, more scrappers approaching from Sector 4. We cannot hold this position for long. Lyra Vale made a decision that went against every Cthar protocol, but somehow felt right. Corvash, get the civilians to the drop ship. Prepare for immediate evacuation. I will retrieve the lieutenant. With respect, Commander. That is an order, Corvash. Her lieutenant hesitated only a moment before nodding and directing the surviving squad members to escort the civilians. Once they had moved ahead, Lyra Vale approached Riley. This will be painful, she warned, gripping the metal strut that pinned him. Story of my life, Riley replied through gritted teeth. With a surge of strength, she lifted the debris enough for him to drag himself free. He collapsed immediately, unable to support his own weight. Without hesitation, Lyra Vale hoisted him over her shoulder in a fireman's carry. This is undignified, she muttered. I won't tell anyone you got your hands dirty saving a human. He managed to quip despite his obvious pain. As she carried him toward the exit, a new wave of scrappers began to converge on their position. Riley, despite his injuries, continued to fire his weapon over her shoulder, providing covering fire as she navigated the increasingly unstable structure. They had almost reached the exit when Riley suddenly shouted a warning. Lyra Vale turned to see a scrapper different from the others. Larger, more integrated, with what appeared to be cannibalized Cthar technology incorporated into its form. It raised what was unmistakably a modified Cthar energy weapon. Down! Riley yelled, somehow finding the strength to push himself off her shoulder, sending them both tumbling as the energy blast seared the air where they had been standing. Lyra Vale recovered instantly, her training taking over as she returned fire with precision. The advanced scrapper staggered, but didn't fall, its armored plating absorbing most of the energy. The junction box, Riley gasped, pointing to an exposed power conduit near the creature. Overloaded. Without questioning the suggestion, Lyra Vale adjusted her aim and fired 3 precise shots at the junction box. The resulting explosion sent a power surge through the surrounding area, momentarily disabling the advanced scrapper and several of its smaller counterparts. She seized the opportunity, once again lifting Riley and sprinting the final distance to the landing pad where the dropship waited, engines already cycling for immediate departure. As they cleared the facility's main doors, a massive explosion rocked the complex behind them. Lyra Vale glanced back to see sections of the structure collapsing as secondary explosions cascaded through the facility. "What did you do?" she demanded as she carried Riley up the ramp of the dropship. "Might have set the reactor to overload when we passed the main engineering control," he admitted, his voice growing weaker. "Figured, better to destroy the whole thing than let those things keep evolving." "That was not your decision to make," she said, though there was less conviction in her voice than there would have been days earlier. "Court-martial me. If I survive," Riley murmured before losing consciousness. The dropship lifted off as the colony facility was consumed by explosions, effectively destroying the scrapper threat, at least at this location. As they docked with the Vindicator, Lyra Vale personally supervised Riley's transfer to the medical bay, where the ship's physicians immediately began treatment for his numerous injuries. "Will he survive?" she asked the chief medical officer. "Difficult to say, Commander," the physician replied. "Human physiology is resilient in some ways, fragile in others. His injuries are severe, but not necessarily fatal with proper treatment. Ensure he receives whatever care is necessary," she ordered. His actions were instrumental to the mission's success. Later, in her private quarters, Lyra Vale reviewed the data they had managed to salvage from the colony systems. What she found disturbed her deeply. The experimental nanotechnology had not been merely a mining innovation, but appeared to be part of a classified weapons development program, one that had explicitly bypassed normal Cthar scientific protocols regarding adaptive technologies. More troubling still were communications that suggested high-level involvement in concealing the true nature of the project. References to a group called the Ascendancy Directive, appeared in several encrypted messages, a name Lyra Vale had heard only in whispers among the highest echelons of Cathar Command. A soft chime announced Corvash's arrival at her quarters. "Enter," she called, quickly securing the most sensitive files. "Commander," Corvash said as he stepped inside, "I have completed the preliminary mission report." "And?" she prompted, studying her lieutenant's face. "The report conforms to all standard protocols," he said carefully. "However, I found myself unable to accurately categorize Lieutenant Riley's actions within established Cathar military classification parameters." "In what way?" "His methods were unorthodox, often in direct contradiction to established protocols. Yet I cannot deny their effectiveness, nor his courage." Corvash seemed almost uncomfortable with the admission. "He saved my life, Commander. And yours." Lyra Vale was silent for a moment. "Yes, he did." She gestured to the data on her screen. "What I found here suggests that the Scrapper outbreak was no accident. This was a weapons program, Corvash, one with high-level authorization that circumvented normal safeguards." Corvash's expression remained stoic, but his posture stiffened. "That would be a grave violation of Cathar principles." "Indeed, and potentially only the surface of a deeper corruption." She hesitated before continuing. "I intend to investigate further, but I must move carefully. If elements within high command are involved, such an investigation would be dangerous," Corvash observed, "and technically outside your authority as a field commander." "I am aware." She studied her lieutenant carefully. "Your loyalty has always been to the Cathar Empire and its principles, Corvash. I would not ask you to compromise that." "My loyalty is to those principles," "Yes," he agreed, "and to my commanding officer, who has always embodied them." He met her gaze steadily. "If those principles have been betrayed from within, that is a threat more serious than any external enemy." The implied support in his words solidified her resolve. "Very well. For now, we proceed with caution. The official report will indicate that the colony was destroyed to contain the threat, with no mention of our suspicions regarding its origin." "And the human?" Corvash asked. Lyra Vale found herself smiling slightly, an expression rarely seen on her usually stern features. "Lieutenant Riley has proven himself unexpectedly valuable. His different perspective may be precisely what we need in the investigation ahead. Assuming he survives," Corvash noted pragmatically. "He will," Lyra Vale said with unexpected certainty. "Humans are surprisingly resilient, like their approaches to problems. Messy, unpredictable, but effective." Over the next several days, as the Vindicator continued its patrol duties, Lyra Vale divided her time between her official responsibilities and a careful investigation into the Ascendancy Directive. She discovered references to similar research facilities on other remote outposts, each operating under the same unusual security protocols that bypassed normal Cathar oversight. Riley, meanwhile, slowly recovered in the medical bay. His injuries had indeed been severe: multiple fractures, internal bleeding, and neural trauma. But as Lyra Vale had predicted, his human resilience was proving remarkable. On the 5th day after the colony incident, she visited him in the medical bay, finding him propped up on the examination platform, already arguing with the medical officer about being allowed to return to duty. "Commander," he greeted her, attempting to straighten his posture despite obvious pain. "Can I check if I've died yet?" "Evidently not," she replied dryly. "Though your continued attempts to leave medical care prematurely may accomplish what the Scrappers could not." The medical officer excused himself, leaving them alone. "I need to speak with you privately," Lyra Vale said, her voice lowered. "What I am about to share is highly sensitive." Riley's expression immediately grew serious, the habitual humor dropping away. "I'm listening." She outlined what she had discovered about the Ascendancy Directive and the connections to the experimental weapons program that had created the Scrappers. "So, someone high up in Cathar Command is running off-books weapons research," Riley summarized. "And now they have a mess to clean up, including witnesses." "Precisely. The colonial survivors have been transferred to a Cathar medical facility for extended observation, which I suspect is a pretense to keep them isolated until the situation can be managed. And you think we might be on the hit list too, since we were there and asked too many questions? It is a possibility I cannot discount, she admitted, particularly as I have continued to investigate despite having no official authorization to do so. Riley studied her with newfound respect. Never thought I'd see the day when Commander by the Book Lyra Vale would go off protocol. These circumstances are exceptional, she said stiffly. They always are, he replied with a hint of his usual smile. So what's the plan? I'm assuming you have one, since you're here talking to the resident expert in breaking rules and improvising. Despite herself, Lyra Vale felt a small smile tugging at her lips. I require your assistance in accessing and decrypting certain secured files. Your unorthodox approach to technology may prove useful. Happy to help, Riley said, attempting to sit up straighter and wincing with the effort. Though I might need a few more days before I can crawl through any maintenance ducts or tackle any more scrappers. Your physical presence is not immediately required. I can bring the relevant systems to you here. Riley raised an eyebrow. Bringing classified systems into the medical bay? Now who's breaking protocols? As you have repeatedly demonstrated, Lieutenant, sometimes effectiveness must take precedence over procedure. His eyes widened slightly at her words. Did I just hear Commander Lyra Vale endorse my philosophy? I think I need the doctor to check for auditory hallucinations. Do not become accustomed to it, she advised, though the usual edge was missing from her voice. This is a temporary alliance of necessity. Of course, he agreed, his expression turning serious again. But to be clear, you understand what you're stepping into, right? If there really is a secret faction in your high command running illegal weapons programs, they're not going to be happy about us poking around. I am a Cathar commander, she said with quiet dignity. My oath is to protect the Empire and its principles, not to protect those who would corrupt it from within. Riley nodded slowly. All right then, bring me what you've got, and let's see what we can find. Over the next few days, as Riley continued his recovery, he and Lyra Vale established a clandestine routine. She would bring secure data modules to the medical bay during off-peak hours, and he would apply his unconventional decryption techniques to access information that was deliberately hidden from normal Cathar command channels. Their security is good, Riley admitted after several hours of work on a particularly stubborn data node. But they've made a classic mistake. Which is? Lyra Vale asked, standing watch near the door to ensure they weren't interrupted. They built everything on Cathar protocols. Very orderly, very logical, and therefore predictable if you know how to look at it sideways. His fingers moved rapidly over the interface. The Cathar approach to encryption is like a perfect fortress with straight walls and regular patrols. Impressive, but once you know the pattern, the screen suddenly filled with decrypted data. There, got it. Lyra Vale moved closer, studying the information. These are transfer orders. Multiple shipments of experimental materials to a facility in the Haraketh sector. I'm not familiar with any Cathar outpost in that region. That's because it's not on any official star charts, Riley said, bringing up a navigational display. It's in the shadow of a pulsar, perfect for hiding energy signatures. We used to call places like that ghost stations in the Alliance Navy, off-books facilities for projects too sensitive or too illegal for normal channels. Lyra Vale's expression darkened. The Ascendancy Directive appears to have established an entire parallel command structure within the Empire. She scrolled through more data, her eyes narrowing. And these authorizations bear the signatures of members of the High Strategic Council itself. So we're talking about corruption at the very top, Riley said solemnly. That complicates things. Indeed, Lyra Vale straightened, her decision made. We need to gather concrete evidence, something that cannot be dismissed or explained away. The facility in the Haraketh sector may contain the proof we need. You're suggesting we go rogue and investigate this ghost station? Riley asked, raising an eyebrow. That's very un-Cathar of you, Commander. These circumstances demand exceptional measures, she replied stiffly. The integrity of the Empire is at stake. I'm with you, Riley assured her. Just surprised to hear it from you, that's all. But there's a problem. How exactly do we get to this secret facility? I doubt the Vindicator's official orders will conveniently take us to the Haraketh sector. Leave that to me, Lyra Vale said. As you have demonstrated repeatedly, Lieutenant, sometimes one must improvise. 2 days later, the Vindicator received new orders, ostensibly from Cathar High Command, to investigate an anomalous energy signature in a sector adjacent to Haraketh. Only Lyra Vale, Riley, and Korvash knew that the orders had been carefully fabricated using command codes extracted from the decrypted data. This is a significant risk, Commander, Korvash noted privately as they reviewed the planned operation. If discovered, it would be considered treason. I am aware, Lyra Vale replied evenly. If you wish to withdraw your support, I would understand. Korvash straightened. I pledged my loyalty to the true principles of the Cathar Empire, Commander. That pledge remains unbroken. Riley, finally released from medical care, though still moving with evident stiffness, joined them in the secure planning room. So, we're actually doing this? Going after the big bad secret science club? We are conducting a legitimate investigation into threats to Imperial security, Lyra Vale corrected. The methods are unorthodox, but the purpose is in complete alignment with our duty. Whatever helps you sleep at night, Commander, Riley said with a hint of his usual irreverence. So what's the plan once we get there? I'm guessing we can't just knock on the front door and ask for a tour of their illegal weapons lab. We will dispatch a small scout vessel with sensor-dampening capabilities, Lyra Vale explained. A team of 3, myself, Lieutenant Riley, and Korvash, will approach the facility under cover of the pulsar's radiation. We will infiltrate, gather evidence of the Ascendancy Directive's activities, and extract without detection. And if we are detected, Korvash asked pragmatically. Lyra Vale's expression was grim. Then we ensure the evidence reaches the proper authorities, regardless of our own fate. 3 days later, their small scout ship slipped silently through the turbulent radiation wake of the Haraketh pulsar. True to Riley's assessment, the facility was well hidden, a massive structure built into an asteroid, its energy signature carefully masked by the pulsar's natural emissions. Impressive setup, Riley murmured as they observed the facility through the scout ship sensors. No standard approach vectors, automated defense systems integrated into the asteroid's natural features. These people really don't want visitors. There, Korvash pointed to a section of the facility. Maintenance access port. Minimal. Security compared to the main docking bays. Good eye, Riley nodded. That's our way in. Using the scout ship's advanced stealth systems, themselves a recent Cathar military development, they approached the maintenance port without triggering any apparent alarms. Riley bypassed the security protocols with surprising ease, using techniques that made Lyra Vale raise an eyebrow. Alliance intelligence training, he explained with a shrug when he caught her look. They like to make sure field operatives can get into places they're not supposed to be. You were intelligence? She asked, surprised. Among other things, he replied vaguely. Let's just say I've worn different uniforms before this one. Once inside, they moved cautiously through the maintenance corridors, avoiding the few technicians they encountered. The facility's interior was unmistakably Cathar in design. Angular, efficient, with the distinctive blue-white lighting preferred by the species. But there was something subtly wrong about it that Lyra Vale couldn't immediately identify. No insignias, Korvash observed quietly, putting her unease into words. A Cathar military facility should display unit emblems, command chain markers. Because this place officially doesn't exist, Riley nodded. Can't leave identifying marks for something that isn't supposed to be here. They accessed a terminal junction, and Riley once again demonstrated his unorthodox but effective approach to Cathar security systems, gaining them access to the facility's internal schematics. Research labs are here. He indicated a section 2 levels below their position. And look at the power allocation. Whatever they're working on, it's energy intensive. We should also access their secure data storage, Lyra Vale decided. Located here, she pointed to another section of the schematic. Korvash, you will secure our extraction route. Lieutenant Riley and I will split up to cover both objectives. Commander, with respect, separation increases risk, Corvash protested. Time is limited, she countered. We must gather sufficient evidence before our absence from the scout ship is noticed. Reluctantly, Corvash agreed to the plan. They synchronized their comm units and separated, with Corvash moving to secure their escape route, while Riley and Lyra Vale headed toward their respective targets. Lyra Vale moved through the facility with the silent efficiency that had earned her command of an elite squadron at a relatively young age for a Cathar officer. She encountered few personnel. The facility appeared to operate with minimal staffing, likely another security measure, and those she did see were easily avoided. She reached the data storage center without incident and used the access codes Riley had extracted from the terminal to enter. The room was filled with Cathar data storage units, their crystalline matrices humming with contained energy. She quickly inserted a specialized data extraction device into the main console and began copying files. The information that scrolled across her portable scanner confirmed her worst fears. The Ascendancy Directive was indeed a splinter faction within Cathar High Command, dedicated to developing weapons and technologies that violated not only Cathar ethical principles, but interstellar conventions as well. The Scrappers were just one of several projects, adaptive weapons designed to evolve in response to enemy defenses, becoming increasingly deadly with each encounter. More disturbing still were references to genetic purity initiatives and species superiority implementation, phrases that suggested the directive's goals went beyond mere military advantage to something far more sinister. Her comm unit vibrated softly with an incoming transmission. "Commander," Riley's voice came through, tense and hushed. "You need to see this. Research Lab 7. Now." The urgency in his voice convinced her to abandon the data download, despite it being incomplete. She removed the extraction device, secured it inside her armor, and moved quickly toward Riley's position. She found him standing in a large laboratory, surrounded by containment units that held various stages of what were unmistakably Scrapper prototypes. But it was what occupied the central containment field that drew her attention. A humanoid figure, partly mechanical, partly biological, suspended in a nutrient solution. "Is that?" she began. "A human," Riley confirmed grimly. "Or what's left of one. Look at the others." She followed his gesture to adjacent containment fields. Each held a different species, representatives from various alliance races, all in similar states of partial conversion into Scrapper-like entities. "They're not just building weapons," Riley said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "They're converting sentient beings into these things. Prisoners, maybe, or kidnapped civilians from border worlds." Lyra Vale felt something she had rarely experienced in her career, a cold, pure rage that threatened to overwhelm her disciplined control. "This violates everything the Cathar Empire stands for. Our warriors face enemies with honor on the field of battle. This is abomination." "I've downloaded their research data," Riley said, holding up a data module. "It's all here, the experiments, the subjects, the directive members involved. Everything we need to expose them." Before Lyra Vale could respond, alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. "Intruder alert. Security breach in research section. All security personnel deploy immediately. Containment protocols engaged." "Damn it," Riley muttered. "Someone's onto us." Lyra Vale's comm unit activated. "Commander," Corvash's voice came through, the sound of weapons fire in the background. "Our extraction is compromised. Security forces at the maintenance port. They appear to have been expecting us. We've been betrayed," Lyra Vale realized. "Someone in the command chain must have detected our false orders." "So much for the stealth approach," Riley said, drawing his weapon. "Plan B. We fight our way out," she replied, her own weapon already in hand. "Corvash, fall back to Junction Point Delta. We will rendezvous there." "Acknowledged, Commander." They moved quickly through the facility, now abandoning stealth for speed. Security forces, Cathar soldiers wearing unmarked armor, converged on their position, forcing them to take a circuitous route toward the rendezvous point. During a particularly intense firefight in a connecting corridor, Riley demonstrated once again why his unorthodox methods had value. When conventional tactics failed to breach the security team's defensive position, he improvised an explosive device from equipment in a nearby maintenance alcove, creating a diversion that allowed them to advance. They reached Junction Point Delta to find Corvash engaged in combat with several security officers. Together, they eliminated the immediate threat, but it was clear their situation was deteriorating rapidly. The maintenance port is heavily guarded now, Corvash reported, a wound on his arm seeping blue Kthar blood. And they've locked down all standard exit routes. There has to be another way out, Riley insisted, checking his weapon's charge level. A place this secretive would have emergency protocols, escape routes for high-ranking personnel in case of exposure. The command center, Lyra Vale decided. It would have override capabilities for all facility systems, including emergency evacuation protocols. That's likely to be the most heavily defended section, Corvash pointed out. Yes, she agreed, but also our best chance. They fought their way through increasingly determined resistance toward the facility's central command hub. The layout became more complex, with multiple security checkpoints and choke points designed specifically to prevent unauthorized access. During one particularly difficult engagement, Corvash was struck by enemy fire, the energy blast penetrating his armor at a weak joint. Riley immediately pulled him to cover while Lyra Vale provided suppressing fire. "How bad?" she asked when they had momentarily repelled the attack. "Functional," Corvash replied stoically, though his color had paled noticeably. "The wound is manageable." "Like hell it is," Riley muttered, examining the injury more closely. That hit severed a major circulation pathway. "He's losing too much blood." Lyra Vale knew he was right. Kthar physiology was resilient, but even they could not function indefinitely with a major circulatory injury. "We need to get him to proper medical care. First, we need to get out of here alive," Riley reminded her. He turned to Corvash. "Can you still shoot?" "Of course," the Kthar lieutenant replied with dignity. "Good. You stay here, in this defensive position. Cover our advance to the command center. Once we've secured an evacuation route, we'll come back for you." Corvash looked to Lyra Vale, who nodded her agreement with the plan. "It is sound tactical thinking, Corvash. Conserve your strength and maintain this position." "As you command," he acknowledged, settling into a protected alcove with a clear line of fire down the corridor they had just traversed. Lyra Vale and Riley continued toward the command center, facing increasingly elite security forces as they approached. Their progress slowed, each firefight more intense than the last. "They really don't want us reaching that command center," Riley observed as they took cover behind a barricade, energy blasts scorching the wall behind them. "The evidence we've gathered would expose the highest levels of Kthar leadership," Lyra Vale replied. "They cannot allow that." A new voice suddenly boomed over the facility's communication system. "Commander Lyra Vale, this is Director Krevin AR of the Ascendancy Directive. Your situation is untenable. Surrender now and your crew will be spared. Continue this futile resistance, and you will all die here." "Friendly guy," Riley muttered. "Wanna bet he's lying about the being spare part?" "There is no doubt," Lyra Vale agreed. "We have seen what they do to those they capture." They pushed forward with renewed determination, fighting through the final security cordon to reach the approach to the command center. As they prepared for the final assault, Lyra Vale's tactical assessment was grim. The command center entrance was heavily fortified, with multiple defensive positions and what appeared to be automated weapon systems. "We need a diversion," she concluded. Riley studied the layout, then pointed to an access panel near the ceiling. "Environmental control junction. If I can reach it, I might be able to trigger the fire suppression system. The suppressant foam would provide cover for your approach." "It's exposed," she pointed out. "You would be vulnerable during the attempt." "Yeah, well, improvisation usually comes with risks," he replied with a grim smile. "Cover me." "Always," she promised, her tone making the word feel more significant than its tactical meaning warranted. Riley moved quickly, using the minimal cover available, while Lyra Vale provided precise, covering fire that kept the defenders' heads down. He reached the access panel and began working on it with the focused intensity she had come to respect, even as energy blasts struck dangerously close to his position. Suddenly, the facility's lights flickered, and white foam began pouring from ceiling vents throughout the corridor leading to the command center. The defenders' visual field was instantly compromised, their fire becoming erratic and unfocused. "Now!" Riley shouted, dropping back to the floor. Lyra Vale charged through the foam-filled corridor, Riley close behind her. They breached the command center entrance before the defenders could adapt to the changing conditions, engaging in close-quarters combat that favored Lyra Vale's superior Kthar strength and Riley's surprisingly effective hand-to-hand capabilities. Within moments, they had secured the command center, neutralizing the small staff of officers and technicians without casualties. They wanted prisoners who could testify, not martyrs to the directive's cause. "Find the evacuation protocols," Lyra Vale ordered as she secured the prisoners, "and see if you can access their communication systems. We need to transmit the evidence we've gathered to multiple secure locations." Riley worked rapidly at the main console, his human adaptability once again proving invaluable as he navigated the unfamiliar specific configurations of this secretive facility systems. "Got it," he announced after several tense minutes. "Emergency evacuation shuttle bay, 1 level down. Automated systems, minimal security since it's designed for rapid escape. Can you lock down the rest of the facility to clear our path?" "Already on it," he confirmed, fingers flying over the controls. "Sealing bulkheads between sections, overriding security protocols. Should hold them off long enough for us to reach Corvash and get to the shuttle bay." As he worked, Lyra Vale secured their evidence, ensuring both her data extraction device and Riley's module were safely stored. "What about the transmission?" "That's the problem," Riley said grimly. "They've got this place locked down tight. No outgoing communications. We need to physically breach their jamming systems, and those are probably in a separate facility section we can't reach right now." "Then we take the evidence out ourselves," she decided. "Cool, me. We must retrieve Corvash quickly." They retraced their steps, moving more freely now that Riley had sealed many of the intervening sections. They found Corvash still conscious, but significantly weakened, the area around him littered with the bodies of security forces who had attempted to overwhelm his position. "Your aim remains true, old friend," Lyra Vale commented as she helped him to his feet. "A Kthar warrior does not falter while breath remains," he replied, though his voice was noticeably strained. With Riley supporting Corvash on one side and Lyra Vale providing cover, they made their way toward the evacuation shuttle bay. Riley's lockdown had indeed slowed the facility's security response, but alarms throughout the complex indicated they were attempting to override his modifications. They reached the shuttle bay to find it as he had described, an automated system with a single sleek evacuation craft designed for rapid departure. As they approached the shuttle, however, the facility's main doors began to cycle open. "They're overriding the lockdown faster than I expected," Riley said tersely. "We need to move now." They hurried toward the shuttle, Corvash's condition deteriorating with each step. As they reached the craft's entrance ramp, the first security forces began pouring through the now open doors. "Get him aboard," Riley ordered suddenly, helping transfer Corvash's weight entirely to Lyra Vale. "I'll hold them off while you get the shuttle prepped for launch." "Lieutenant," she began to protest. "No time to argue, Commander," he cut her off. "He needs immediate medical attention, and someone needs to buy you that time. I'm the logical choice." Before she could respond, he moved into a defensive position, laying down a barrage of cover fire that forced the incoming security forces to seek shelter, temporarily halting their advance. Lyra Vale hesitated only a moment before helping Corvash up the ramp. She settled him in one of the passenger seats, then moved quickly to the pilot's position, activating the shuttle's systems with practiced efficiency. Through the viewport, she could see Riley maintaining his position, using the shuttle bay's cargo containers as cover while systematically forcing the security teams back for the launch area. His tactics were, as always, unorthodox but effective. He seemed to be setting improvised explosive charges on fuel containers, creating a barrier of fire and debris that would prevent pursuit. The shuttle's engines came online, the craft humming with power as the automated launch sequence engaged. Lyra Vale opened the external communication channel. "Lieutenant Riley, the shuttle is ready for departure. Fall back now." She saw him glance toward the shuttle, a strange expression crossing his face. Determination mixed with something else she couldn't quite identify. He triggered another explosive charge, then began moving toward the shuttle, still firing to keep the security forces at bay. He had almost reached the ramp when a new contingent of security forces entered from a side entrance, flanking his position. One of them carried what was clearly a heavy energy weapon, military grade, not standard security issue. "Riley, behind you," Lyra Vale shouted into the comm. He turned, spotted the new threat, and immediately altered course, moving away from the shuttle to draw their fire. The heavy weapon discharged, missing Riley but hitting a fuel conduit near his position. The resulting explosion threw him violently against a cargo container. Lyra Vale's hand moved automatically to the shuttle's weapon controls, targeting the new security team and eliminating them with a precise burst of energy fire. The path to the shuttle was momentarily clear. "Riley, now," she called again. He struggled to his feet, clearly injured but still mobile. He started toward the shuttle once more, but his movements were slow, compromised. Behind him, more security forces were regrouping for another push. The facility's reactor, his strained voice came over the comm. "They're initiating an overload sequence. They'd rather destroy everything than let the evidence get out. All the more reason to hurry," she insisted. "No time," he said, his breathing labored. "You need to launch now, before the bay doors lock down. That's standard containment protocol for a reactor emergency." As if confirming his words, warning klaxons began to sound throughout the facility, and the massive bay doors began to slowly close. "We're not leaving without you," Lyra Vale stated firmly. "Yes, you are," Riley countered, "because you have the evidence. You have Corvash, who needs medical attention, and you're the only one who can make sure this gets to the right people." He paused, firing another burst at advancing security forces. "Besides, I've still got one more trick up my sleeve. These bastards aren't going to find me easy prey." Lyra Vale knew he was right. Tactically, strategically, the mission had to take priority. The evidence they had gathered could prevent countless deaths, expose a corruption at the heart of her civilization, stop atrocities like the ones they had witnessed in the research lab. But something in her rebelled at the cold calculation. "Jax," she said, using his first name for the first time. "Go," he insisted. "Make it mean something, Lyra." With a sense of loss that surprised her in its intensity, she activated the launch sequence. The shuttle's ramp retracted, its engines flaring to full power as it rose from the bay floor. Through the viewport, she saw Riley take up a new position, one that would allow him to delay the security forces as long as possible while giving the shuttle room to maneuver toward the narrowing bay doors. As the shuttle accelerated toward freedom, she caught a final glimpse of him. He had removed something from his belt, a device she hadn't seen before, and was manipulating it with focused intensity even as he continued to exchange fire with the security forces. The shuttle cleared the bay doors moments before they sealed completely, shooting out into the turbulent space around the asteroid facility. Lyra Vale immediately engaged the stealth systems and set course for the rendezvous coordinates where the Vindicator waited. Behind them, the facility remained intact for several long moments. Then, as the shuttle reached a safe distance, multiple explosions blossomed across its surface. Not the catastrophic reactor overload that would have destroyed everything, but precisely targeted detonations that seemed to focus on specific sections. The research labs, Corvash observed weakly from his seat. He destroyed the research labs. In the primary data storage, Lyra Vale added, watching the pattern of destruction, ensuring that even if they captured him, their most valuable assets would be lost. One final, larger explosion tore through a section of the facility, and sensors indicated a massive power failure throughout the remaining structure. He disabled their reactor, she realized. Not an overload, but a controlled shutdown. They'll have no power to pursue or communicate for some time. A warrior's last stand, Corvash said solemnly. Honorable. Lyra Vale did not reply immediately, her thoughts on the human who had so thoroughly challenged her preconceptions, who had proved that there were many kinds of discipline, many forms of honor, many paths to courage. Not his last, she said finally, her voice taking on a hardness that would have surprised anyone who knew her before these events. If he lives, we will return for him, and if he has fallen, then we will ensure his sacrifice was not in vain. The small shuttle continued its journey through the pulsar's radiation wake, carrying its precious cargo of evidence, and two warriors forever changed by their encounter with a human who had taught them that sometimes breaking the rules was the most honorable path of all. 3 months later, the Cthar warship Vindicator approached the central military command station orbiting the Cthar homeworld. Its mission complete, the crew prepared for the standard debriefing and reassignment procedures that followed a successful deployment. But for Commander Lyra Vale, this return was different from any before. The evidence she and her team had gathered from the Ascendancy Directive facility had indeed reached the right authorities. Those Cthar leaders still committed to the true principles of honor and duty that had guided their civilization for millennia. The resulting investigation had shaken the Empire to its foundations. High-ranking officials had been arrested, secret facilities dismantled, illegal weapons programs terminated. The process of purging the corruption would be long and difficult, but it had begun in earnest. Lyra Vale stood on the Vindicator's observation deck, gazing at the approaching station. She wore her full ceremonial armor, polished to perfection as always, but with one significant modification that had raised eyebrows throughout the fleet. There, emblazoned on her right shoulder plate in human alphanumeric characters, was a single word: Riley. Corvash, fully recovered from his injuries and recently promoted in recognition of his actions, joined her at the viewport. The High Command has transmitted the final prisoner exchange manifest, he reported. The human prisoners recovered from the various directive facilities are being processed for return to Alliance custody. And Lieutenant Riley, she asked, her voice carefully neutral. No confirmation, Corvash replied. He was not among the identified prisoners. However, he hesitated. Speak freely, old friend. There are reports of an unidentified prisoner held in isolation at the maximum security facility on Kreltor. A human who was captured during the raid on a directive installation. Lyra Vale nodded slowly. The Kreltor facility is not included in the exchange agreement. No, Commander. It falls under direct, high command jurisdiction, not diplomatic channels. She turned to face him fully, her silver-blue eyes reflecting the starlight with newfound intensity. Then it appears we have one more mission, Corvash. He straightened, understanding perfectly. The shuttle bay is prepared, Commander. A scout vessel has been requisitioned for routine inspection duties. A small smile, once so rare, now becoming more common, touched her lips. Lieutenant Riley would approve of our improvisation. Indeed, Commander, Corvash agreed. And when we recover him, Lyra Vale touched the human letters emblazoned on her armor, a permanent symbol of respect that violated every Cthar tradition of military decorum. Then I will tell him how a human taught a Cthar commander the true meaning of honor, how his name is now spoken with respect among our warriors, and how his methods, unorthodox, unpredictable, but effective, have become part of our tactical doctrine. She turned from the viewport, her decision made. Prepare the team, Corvash. We leave in 1 hour. For Lieutenant Riley, he said formally. For Jax, she corrected. For the human who wore no name on his armor, but whose name I now wear on mine. Together, they strode from the observation deck, a Cthar commander and her lieutenant, bound not just by duty now, but by something new, a legacy left by a human soldier who had proven that sometimes the greatest honor came from breaking the rules for the right reasons. And somewhere in the depths of a maximum security facility, a prisoner with resourceful eyes and an irrepressible spirit waited. not knowing that a Cathar elite squadron was coming for him, led by a commander who now carried his name in a battle as her most treasured decoration. She had mocked his skills once. Now she wore his name on her armor, and the Cathar Empire would never be the same.